the President General of SWWTU, Michael Anisette, and of course we're in the midst of explaining how all of this came about, what's happening now as far as those folks who have downed their tools at the port. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so that as I was saying, that we had these discussions, and I consider it to be meaningful in that we were able to drill down on some fundamental issues that was required to make the port competitive, efficient, and productive. One of the fundamental concessions we would have made was the question of working 5 and 7, because that was a global phenomenon. And we discussed the question of gang sizes and other operational necessities to make the port efficient. And coming out of that discussion, we would have agreed with a 12% wage increase. And that agreement, which was a memorandum of understanding, was signed off by the Port Authority Management and the executive of the Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. But more importantly, the Port Authority hired an industrial relation consultant to guide the process and represent their interests around the negotiation table. Okay, that was in August 2015. The elections was called, and after we were advised that the new government doesn't want to honor that agreement because they say the process was flawed. Having said that, we would have made representation, and when I said we, meaning the National Trade Union Center, because I'm the General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center, to discuss with the Minister of Finance, Minister Imbert, about the outstanding negotiations that public sector workers were experiencing. And mind you, we are talking about in 2015 now, and we're in 2024, and we still have outstanding negotiations that are existing. And the issue of the port was raised, and the minister would have articulated to me that, Mr. Anisette, look, I don't want to discuss this within a NATUC framework, but I want to discuss that outside of a NATUC framework. And I did make some proposals, and he asked me if the proposal I was making was for the trade union movement. I said, no, I'm speaking on behalf of Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, because at that meeting we would have asked for the implementation of the 12% to cut down the exacerbation that will arise each day if you do not implement the 12% and the cost it will derive in the context of back pay.
All right, let me ask you this, President General.
Yeah.
Because I know the people who are weighing in on this right now are saying that now prior to this election, of course, in 2015, a lot would have been said. A lot would have been of music to your ears, and that, of course, of your executive promises would have been made. Are you saying, of course, that whatever was said, this administration did not keep their end of the bargain?
What I am saying is that the agreement was negotiated under the UNC regime.
Right.
And when this government came into power, they failed to recognize and honor a legitimate agreement that was acquiesced between the Port Authority and the Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union.
Were there any correspondence with this administration coming in? Or basically you expected that since this was inked and everything was sealed, that they would have lived up to whatever it is the arrangements were?
But that is standard industrial relation practice. That is standard even in the context of government-to-government arrangements.
And that's the reason why I asked you,
of business ethics and principles.
And that's the reason why I asked you that, President General, because it has come to our attention, and we've had the PSA here on the Observer, we've had many of the other unions, and the consensus is that this administration is not union friendly. As a matter of fact, the unions are viewed more of a liability than an asset, which is there to represent the interests of the workers. And have you seen this playing out yourself over these past years?
Yeah, yeah, obviously. There cannot be no doubt that the People National Movement administration under Dr. Keith Rowley would have done everything to undermine and isolate the trade union movement. I will give you just one simple example. Coming out of going back to Eric Williams days, the issue of trade union representatives on state boards and statutory board was something that was implemented. And it was a policy that was carried through by every government, including the coalition, including under ANR, including under Chambers, including under Manning. And when this regime came into power, they made it clear that they are not going to honor the placement of workers' representative or worker voice on these boards other than the boards where it was legally required for the trade union to have a voice. That is a fact. They cannot deny it, but more importantly, the issue of not giving directives to the state enterprises and statutory bodies to start negotiations over a period of 10, 12, 14 years in some instances clearly demonstrates an insensitivity and a lack of appreciation that workers are the driving force of any economy. And when you take away their purchasing powers and their ability to buy goods and service, you are in effect interfering with the economic growth of any economy. But more importantly, when you marginalize the middle class, like this government would have done, you are setting up your economy and your country for all kinds of fallouts that arise from that kind of policy decision. And one of that is crime. Crime didn't happen just so. No one is born a criminal. There are some underlying factors that is responsible for the spate of crime as we see it in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, we need to speak truth to power, and we need to start to drill down on these issues, because the issue of not paying government employees proper decent living wages, where the government is the biggest employer in Trinidad and Tobago, is a prescription for an economic nightmare, and is a prescription for pushing Trinidad and Tobago over the economic cliff. That's a reality. That's an economic reality. Because economics is not about if you sell petrol or you sell the port, Economics is about people. Economics is about people stand up and living, and the right to have sustainable jobs and living wages. That is what economic is all about.
I agree with you, President General. I agree with you. Again, it goes back to my saying that you agreed with, that this administration looks at the union more of a liability and not that of an asset.
Not the union, the working class, the poor, the disadvantaged community, the pensioners. Right? Those are the people that attention, the single mothers, the pensioners. Look, I have a paper here. A police officer had to go and protest and say he's going in a fast because his benefits have not been paid to him, and he retired from the police force. This is madness. Why must a worker have to do that? Do we see that with government pensioners? Do we see that? No. I want to say government pensioner. I mean the pension for the Prime Minister and other people in the hierarchy of the economic ladder in Trinidad and Tobago. And if we don't want to talk about it, we're going to regret as a country that we failed to raise these issues so that we could bring out the real potential of Trinidad and Tobago. And it must not be just a few benefiting who have finances and are friends of the government. It must not be. It cannot be.
Explain to us, one of the issues here is that all the negotiations and conversation has been going on to try to achieve a fair and collaborative resolution. This issue with the Port Authority, the board has chosen to implement a disclosure form for employees to sign prior to receiving their promotion notices. Is this common industrial practice?
No. This has never been practiced in the Port Authority in Trinidad and Tobago. It has never been practiced. But that is not the issue. No. The issue is that in light of the impasse on all what is going on, the management choose on their own, and as we say, unilaterally, without consulting the recognized majority union, which is a requirement in law, because what they propose to do is a change of terms and conditions of employment, and it's only the two parties can agree with that. And I want the public to understand that. And what this management choose to do is to tell workers that you have until the 1st of November to sign these forms, and if you do not sign the forms, we will withdraw your promotion. What madness is that? What confusion and disaffection and anger that you want to cause among the workforce. And you must expect the kind of reaction that we are seeing now from the workers. I'm a worker. I was a port employee, and I know how long it takes for I to get promoted. I was promoted after assistant shed manager, and I never had to sign a disclosure form. And then if that is what you want to do, and then what is the disclosure form? To tell me that I'm not working here, I'm not working there, and I'm not employed there. No. What kind of madness is that? What kind of infantile disorder is that? Right, and then it have other issues that I can make reference to where the management unilaterally went about and implement decisions. Like if the port, it has been willed to the management by their parents, and we the workers and the union have no say or no right to stand up for our rights.
Let me ask you something as well, President General, because there have been reports that trainees who are now coming into the system are being paid more than workers who have been there for years.
No. It's not trainees in the Port of Port of Spain. It is trainees at Point Lisas. Point Lisas, as you may recall, was set up in the 1980s, thereabout. All right? And when I was the president of Seamen and Waterfront Workers here, brother, trade union, when I took over, the workers were getting in Point Lisas lower rates than that of Port of Spain. But the Port of Port of Spain and the Port of Point Lisas is a port, and we do the same jobs. And I would have argued why it is that a ship-to-shore gantry operator in the Port of Port of Spain must get more money than the ship-to-shore gantry operator in Point Lisas. When they are doing the same job, they are driving the same equipment, and the job is of equal value. And then, therefore, there must be a level of equity in the salaries. Having said that, we were able to negotiate over an extended period of time to bring those workers, all right, on par with the counterparts in Port of Spain. But what has happened? Port Lisas have had about three years going into 4 years, which is 12 years collective agreements, when the Port of Port of Spain, the government never directed the management to meet and treat with the union over those 12-year period. So that quite obviously the rates of salaries in Point Lisas has gone past astronomically above the rates of that of Port of Spain workers. And the Port of Spain, as you know and the public know, have been in existence years before Point Lisas. How do I... Right, okay. That's it. Yeah. How can I, as the president of Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, and the workers in Point Lisas and Port of Spain are my children, am I going to sit down and accept that a trainee in Point Lisas, who is now training to operate a ship-to-shore gantry crane, which is the highest rate, right, in the port and globally, is getting more money than a Port of Spain employee who have been working on that piece of equipment for as much as 15 to 20 years. Is that fair? Is that equity? Does that make common sense? And those are the issues we have been pointing out to the government and the Minister of Finance, and they're not paying attention. So then you have a dissatisfied workforce who comes out there under all kinds of conditions that is not suitable an environment for work, which is a health hazard. They are getting less pay and they are required to work much more and harder than the counterparts in Point Lisas, whose salaries are much more than the dock workers in Port of Spain. That is a reality.
Yes, now all that you have said there has brought us up to date on everything. I mean, again, this is not something that has just taken place overnight. These workers have really and truly been treated in a manner that has not been seen before as far as industrial relations. But now you have the chambers weighing in. You have DOMA, of course, saying that over almost 700 containers have been affected by the actions of these workers. The country's exports are in trouble. You have other people weighing in and saying, not at this time, it is Christmas, it is not the season. Things that are needed, especially for businesses, they can find themselves being crippled by what is taking place. How do you then explain to them, listen, that's not where the focus is, but the focus is on the rights of these workers?
Right. Let me put it how I would normally put it. We have what you call a working class group of people. And you have an elitist class, a business class, all right, and an elitist politicians. And what history has taught me is that they sing for their own supper and they think about themselves. And the question of profits and their business trumps anything. But this issue that we are talking about is the economic issue that has implications for Trinidad and Tobago. Where is the DOMA insisting that the government do the right thing on the Port Authority? They haven't said anything because this issue did not happen yesterday. They were quite aware of some of these burning issues. Where was DOMA? Where was the chambers? And then we are not going to accept that. And let me make it clear to the public here. Dock workers are prepared to stand up for our rights. And we know freedom only comes from struggle. And we will struggle. They could do what they want to do. They could squeeze us out. They could try to run the union. They could try to sell the port, a major asset for any economy, because the 5 major ports in the world, they are owned by the government. And why we cannot do it? Why you run down the port deliberately so that you could sell to your friends and partners and say you're doing a PP relationship? Like if that is the answer, when the history is something different. And I understand that, and I'm telling the DOMA president, come and talk to Siemens Union. Come and understand what are the real issues. Because you don't sell a plot. And if anybody come to you and they don't work with the money for the price of your goods, you're not going to sell them. You are not. And if you don't have workers to buy your cloth for Christmas, or we don't have the money, your business is going to bust, like what we are seeing in several malls, what we are seeing with small business and small enterprises, because we do not have the wherewithal to sustain them. We have the issue with the forex, right? What is causing that? How can I go to Guyana, Antigua, Jamaica, Grenada, and get US just like that, and I can't get it in Trinidad and Tobago? Something is fundamentally wrong with the system, and we must look at all these things. And I'm telling the business community, this is not about you only. This issue is a fundamental issue of fundamental human rights, and it borders on arrogance and dictatorship, a creeping dictatorship that we must not allow to happen, because we have said in the union that we are willing to work with all stakeholders, including the business, for a better port. We would have demonstrated that by signing that agreement. What more do you want from us? When we had COVID-19, the dock workers was the first line of defense, because every cargo that came into Trinidad and Tobago, the dock workers who had to handle it and discharged. We had dock workers who paid the supreme price. We didn't cover it. And now, for our rights, for decent wages, for our rights to be paid the wages that we sat down with the Port Authority and agreed with, that the Port Authority signed. I don't want to know that the CPO didn't instruct them. That is not my business. My business is that in the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the recognized majority union is Seamen's Union, and the employer, according to the law, is the Port Authority. The employer is not the government, and then therefore the government must not interfere with the due process of collective bargaining by making decisions that they would have taken in cabinet to depress wages for government employees. That is what is happening, because the NIB workers, where the board and management agreed a 9% wage increase, and the industrial court registered that agreement, the Minister of Finance challenged that, and up to now the NIB workers haven't been paid the 9%. And the question you have to ask, if the industrial court is a superior court of records, how come that the Minister of Finance can interfere with the process in the manner in which he has done? Those are fundamental questions. Why do the business community in talk about that? But more importantly, within the same period from 2012 right up to the present, the very private sector would have given wage increases to the workers every 3 years. They cannot deny it. And the average for the 3-year period is 8 percentage points. They cannot deny it. Why it is that this government wants to play that they are the baddest thing, they are tin gods, and whatever we say goes? How do you justify to a port worker that you want to offer him now 0.02% for the period where you get a 12%? Meaning then that workers where you have 0.0 would not get pension increases in an escalating cost of living scenario where we have no control over. Those are the facts. Nobody can deny it. And I'm breaking down economics simple for the people to understand.
Now, President General, it seems as though the tone, when you look at what is being said by administration, the minister, Sinanan, the line minister, he says that he understands that the port management is making every effort to ensure that essential cargo arrives and is cleared promptly to minimize the impact. And now you have, of course, he's saying that if it's a matter of wage issues, it has to be discussed at the level of the CPO. Is the administration disconnected? I mean,
the minister that do not make statements, right, to Seamen's Union, that is not law and is not a legal requirement. The question of the CPO does not rise The CPO is not our employer. The CPO is a secretariat for the government team. All right? We negotiate in law with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And then all I'm simply saying, if the Port Authority sat down and negotiate and acquiesce to the agreement and sign it off, if you believe that they had no authority to do that, do you punish the workers? It come like if a bandit commits an act and you want to punish the family who had no dealings with the act that was committed. That is how we do industrial relation. Tell the minister with the greatest of respect, we are not going to fall for that kind of trapping. We do not negotiate with the CPO. The government, the rated workers, and the PSA, the police service, the army, and amalgamated workers who represent the rated workers. All right, those are the groups of people who negotiate with the CPO, not the Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union.
Right.
I did not sit down around the table with the CPO. We do not sit down around the table, and we have no intention of doing that. If the Port Authority, as you are claiming, which I disagree with, right, and then as I speak to you, do you know that the port management haven't gotten a wage increase since 2012?
Wow.
Is the public aware of that? What kind of insanity and insensitivity is that? And don't forget that at a joint select committee, the Honorable Prime Minister made a statement that on the port is the worst operated. We had thieves and all these kinds of statements. You understand? But up to now, nobody could point your fingers to port workers and the port management and say that we are dishonest people and we are involved in corruption at the highest level that we would have heard from other state enterprises. More importantly, is the public aware that the Port Authority pay their wages from the monies that they own? They don't have to go to the government.
And President General, well said. And I'm certain that you've cleared the air on a lot of things. So when we hear these chambers, we need to let them know that they need to get the full story exactly.
No, they need to meet with the union.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm going and I'm panter to your own interest and your self-interest, which is what is destroying our society. Because it's about I. It is not about we.
All right.
The workers are part of this society and they have a right to be able to share in the resources of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm not going to buy into the narrative that the government can only afford to pay 4% over 6 years. They cannot fool me with that kind of economic analysis. That is a government policy that is rooted in IMF policies, and the government is using IMF policies to depress the wages of government employees. Because if your economy, just let me finish that.
Go ahead, President. We gotta wrap up. We'll go ahead quickly.
All right, but if your economy is doing bad as you claim, how come the private sector who operates within the same economy can pay an average of wage increase over 3-year periods, consecutive 3-year periods of 8 percentage points?
Yeah. That brings us to the end of our interview. I want to thank you so much, President General, for weighing in on this, taking time out, and we will be looking at it and, of course, checking in with you periodically to get this full story. Thank you once again.
Okay, yeah. I appreciate the opportunity.